Welcome to this week's edition of Coach Prep. Coach Don and I are here in the Cherokee Batting Range podcast studio getting ready to record episode number 214. Today we're going to talk about how small physical adjustments can sometimes be the key to helping players kind of getting back on track. Before we get into that, though, let's talk about our sponsors. First, the Anderson Bat Company. Everything Fast Pitch is very proud to have Anderson Bat Company as our presenting sponsor. Anderson Bat Company is using the latest and greatest bat technology to corner the market in the fast pitch world. They have the -9 Rocket Tech, the -10 Carbon, and the -11 Carbon Light. Anderson Bat Company is using this technology to put a high-performing bat in the hands of hitters that really know the difference between a good bat and a great bat. We're also working with Anderson to provide a discount for all of our listeners. Go to the Anderson Bat Company website and order your bats. Use the EFP20 discount, which is for everything fast pitch, and you'll get a 20% discount. And again, make sure you use that EFP20 discount, whether you're getting a bat, glove, bag, any kind of equipment at all. It's a great way for you to save that additional 20% and also support the podcast. And it's already very affordable and high-level equipment, so we'd love to see you support Anderson Bat. Make sure you also consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. Coach Don and I are very fortunate. We've got some hard patrons that have been with us for a long time, but we would love to see that number continuing to grow. If you're in a position where you can help us, if you see value in what we're doing, patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. So Don, one of the things that I think sometimes is lost in the translation is the connection between, the mental part of the game, what your mind is doing and what your body's trying to do. And one of the things that I think sometimes can be a useful tool is for players, if they're feeling like they're in a funk, if they just feel like they're really struggling, is sometimes almost like a random small little physical adjustment might be just enough to give them a little bit of a different feel, a little bit of a different look, and kind of help them maybe, unlock that mental block or whatever it is that's kind of holding them back. I'm not talking about gigantic.
Not wiping the slate clear.
Not huge, gigantic changes. Maybe a small adjustment in where you're standing in the box, maybe a small adjustment in how wide your feet are when you're taking your stance. Just something that gives you just a little bit of a different feel, a little bit of a different focus, maybe kind of get your mind back centered and back on track. Because one of the things that I see quite often when players struggle, they keep doing the same things, they just do more of it. And so because they just keep doing the same things but more of it, that maybe they're not unlocking something that would help them make a small adjustment that would lead them to a little bit more success.
So, Tori, I really like what you're saying with this, because I think that a lot of the kids that train really hard and that take tons and tons and tons of reps can very easily fall into little subtle, bad habits, you could call them, or just little subtle changes in their technically good form. And sometimes it's because of the environment they're in or whatever, and it's something that goes kind of unnoticed. So that small little adjustment, like you're saying, and making a little, tweak here or there can get them back on track.
Right.
And if you remind them about the little things, if we talk about keeping our eyes there a little bit longer, if we talk about making sure that front shoulder stays in, or whatever it might be, or our stride stays neutral or even.
Right.
They might be in an environment where they're getting pitched outside because the pitching's really slow in high school ball or metro ball or whatever, a little bit lower level ball that they're playing in during one season. And then all of a sudden we go back to high-end travel and we're getting jammed on the hands, but we've gotten so used to adapting to the environment we're in that we need to make that one little adjustment, like you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
When I think one of the challenges for all players is, when all people is, we just kind of get that comfort zone. We get used to doing certain things a certain way. And the reality of it is sometimes that's a really good thing. If we've developed really good habits, doing the same good things over and over again is a beautiful thing. But habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits, are still part of the challenge for us when we're talking about playing this game and being successful. And so a little bit of a glitch, a little bit of, something that gets us a little bit off track. Sometimes, it's so small, it's so subtle that it's not an obvious thing. It's not something that everybody can see.
Yeah.
One of the things I spend so much time with the hitters I work with is trying to help them understand and feel what's happening. Because to me, the best hitters are the ones that feel those little things. They don't necessarily have to be able to say what it is, but just enough awareness to go, something didn't feel quite right. Something's not quite right. It just doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel, like it's supposed to. And then once they start to have the awareness of being able to tell that something's not quite right, well, here's some things that you can do. Here's some things that you can focus on to help you fix that. Because the reality of it is, whether, even you and I who spend, our entire lives with hitters, I'm still less likely to see something you feel
small like that
when it's really small quickly enough to make the same kind of adjustment that you could make if you felt something's a little bit off. And so, the idea of small adjustments to kind of help us, pay attention to and make the little corrections that we need to, I think is a good tool to arm players with, and I think sometimes what happens is, a perfect example, young player that I was working with the other day, and she's making a lot of progress, but she's got a ways to go. And working on where her hands are at contact and making sure that she's finishing through the ball and keeping the bat, on plane and behind the ball as long as we can. And she keeps coming back to, but I do this here. I do this here. I always do this here. And I said, well, that's why we're working on it, because we don't want to do that here anymore. And she's so used to it that it's really kind of a struggle right now to get her to understand that when she does what she's used to, that's why she's rolling over the ball and hitting a two-hopper to the pitcher on a pitch that she could potentially be hitting like a ball in the gap if she would do a couple things a little bit differently. And so for her, it's, again, some small little adjustments to help her feel the difference, and then hopefully we can get to the point where the new habit replaces the old habit. But I think that the unfortunate truth is that for a lot of our hitters, they're so set in their ways, they're so sure that they're doing something a certain way, that we need to have a little, I guess, to kind of trick them a little bit, to fool them a little bit into, maybe feeling something, maybe adjusting something a little bit that's going to get them back on track.
So, yeah, Tori, I think that kind of the gold is in the end for them to be able to understand what those little adjustments are going to do for them, and then fine tune, what they're doing based on, the competition level and the things that they're facing at that moment, because we're not there with them all the time.
Right.
And just like you're saying, we're trying to arm them with the consciousness of knowing that a proper swing feels a certain way. Certain pieces of the swing should be a certain way. And when they can feel it and they can make those little adjustments is really the true gold at the end.
Right.
Because they're, off at school or, in another setting where they've got to do it on their own.
Yeah. And so the tool that I want to make sure that we arm them with is the confidence that they can try some of these little things, to experiment a little bit. And again, I'm not talking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm just saying, if I don't feel like I'm swinging in the way I want to, I can either keep doing exactly what I'm doing and hope for a miracle, or I can,
We've got to experiment a little bit.
Right. Try a small adjustment and see if that doesn't get me back on track. So for coaches and players alike, it's important that we're thinking that way and arming ourselves with all the tools that we need to make sure that we can make the adjustments and make the corrections. Because obviously, playing this game is a whole lot more fun when we feel like we're on the right track. So that's going to wrap up episode number 214. Make sure you support our sponsor, the Anderson Bat Company. Become a patron if you can, patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. Go to the fastpitchprep.com website, order your Square Cuts training discs there. They're $49.95 a dozen. We'll get them shipped out to you right away. And make sure you reach out to us at everythingfastpitch@gmail.com or fastpitchprep@gmail.com with questions, ideas, suggestions, and anything you want us to talk about. So for Coach Don McKinley and our producer Stan Lewis, this is Coach Tori saying thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.